Let's get tribal for a moment, and talk about how lefty progressive arguments can often be times tricked into defeating themselves. Particularly the ones that kind of loop into each other and are based on the idea of social deconstruction. The idea that modern-day social mores are, well, they're all purely constructions and they should be gotten rid of, or they don't even exist at all. And then how these arguments also lean into the idea of the social construction to begin with. Now, here's what I'm going to mean by that. Let's talk about the idea that men are privileged in Western society. Okay, if you ever find yourself arguing this with somebody, well, simply ask them to define what is male. And if you happen to be male yourself, well, ask them how they know that you are a male. Now, this will often be the first trick for them, because they'll point things out like, oh, it's the way you look or the way you dress. However, these social deconstructionists will often say that a 6'2" hairy man who's still got all of his parts and bits is just equally as valid as a woman as anyone else, and there should therefore be treated as such from a societal standpoint. Okay, well, if that is true, then how do you know that any of these people that you are claiming are privileged are actually men, and not just women? To which they might bring up the idea, oh, well, they're making an attempt to pass as a woman via the way they dress and the way that they act. And that's another trap. Because again, well, how does a woman dress? How does a woman act? And are you telling me that just because a woman acts or dresses in a certain way that she's not a woman? Truthfully, how do any of these progressives actually know that any of these people are actually male or female? Then, of course, they'll bring up the idea, well, all of these people in high positions of power are all male. It's like, well, are they? Also, aren't there women in positions of power? And if there are, does that still make them women? See, again, this is the problem. And they'll say something to the effect of, oh, these people have been perceived as male. Well, what does perceived as male mean? Because after all, how does one perceive somebody as a male? Is it how they look? Is it their physical structure? Is it how they dress? Because if so, they're invalidating everybody who doesn't fit these ideas. They're invalidating them as being male or female. See, all of these things kind of tie into each other, and you will always find yourself into a little bit of a circular argument going round and round and round, but that is precisely what you want to accomplish here. Because simply put, you're never going to get to a point where the person you're arguing with actually agrees that you're correct. They'll get frustrated, they'll give up, they'll probably hurl insults at you. And at that point in time, you know that they're starting to realize that their argument is not exactly solid, but they still want to be right, and they still identify as being right. But still, eventually, these arguments do come a-calling. Because if you can't identify what is a male by looking, then no one could possibly benefit from male privilege. And if some of these people who are very clearly biologically male, but now identify as female, well, didn't they benefit from male privilege and therefore should be held to different standards? Simply put, learn to hold your ground in an argument and actually think about these things. Whenever they make an assertion, don't just accept the assertion in good faith. Look at their assertion. Because oftentimes, the greatest trick of progressive arguments is that they will make an assertion that you agree with. Something to the effect that men and women are different in society and therefore do receive different treatments, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. But they'll make that assertion and then with the same breath make the assertion that such a thing is either not real or shouldn't be real. So simply put, laser focus in on that. Don't try to use the slippery slope, don't try to take it to the point of ad absurdum. Simply make them follow their own rules, because these rules are impossible to follow. At the end of the day, they will always say, well, you're just mean because you're attacking the people who are marginalized and require the most amount of help. But again, These people who are marginalized, how are they marginalized? Is it because they're perceived as being male or female? And if that's the case, then how are they perceived in such a way? You see, this argument that I'm making loops into itself like a Mobius strip and just goes round and round and round. But that is honestly the best case scenario for these arguments, because that's all they've ever been. Circular arguments that rely on their own false statements in order to be true. In order for their arguments to hold any weight, typically speaking, they have to rely on things that you already agree with. Therefore, you must train your mind to be able to see these things. So, simply put, learn to dig in, hold your ground, and then force them to play by their own rules. Well, that's all for today. Hope this was a fun little video, and y'all have a very nice day.